Good morning, class. I'm just Mr. Thompson here, just trying to get a hold of you and let you know, get you prepared for our economics final. My part of this final is to talk you through Unit 4, which is Problems and Solutions in Americans' Economy, and Unit 5, which is basically the last unit that we talked about dealing with industrialization and globalization, international trade overall. Okay, so I'm going to be going through number 4 and number 5 with you today. So get your packet ready to go. Okay, Unit 4 deals with problems and solutions in the America's economy. One of the key things you got to look at in America's mixed market economy is the business cycle. And we talked about the circular flow, the product market, and the resource market, and talked about how the circular flow has to keep moving in a nice, quick pace. If you think about the circular flow, now you multiply it times the 307 million people in our country, and you put them end to end, you can start seeing now the business cycle. The business cycle is that up and down roller coaster diagram that we looked at here, and it's got 4 main parts. So I'm going to talk about them very briefly in this business cycle. One of the first sections on the business cycle is the recession. The second one is the low point. The third point is the expansion phase. And then the last point is the high peak point. Now remember, our mixed market system is based on producers and consumers. And at time to time, that market running by itself leaves some safety gaps. And we're going to also talk a little bit about government influence along the way. Now, let's look at the business cycle first of all. The business cycle basically looks at our normal, everyday business every year that we've been in business economically, I guess. The first section is recession. A recession is a point when you're starting to go down a little bit on the business cycle. You're going to start to see unemployment starting to rise up. Businesses are not making as much product, and as a result, they're going to have higher unemployment people because they're not selling as much. They can't pay their salary or their hourly wage, so they will have to lay them off. So that they're not working. And as a result of not working, it makes common sense that the people in their households are not spending as much. And as a result, spending goes down. And when spending goes down, less goods and services are being bought. And this downward trend continues because everybody gets very, very constrictive or conservative in their spending. So as that part of the cycle goes down from the recession, if it is not corrected by the market over the long haul, or if it's not corrected with help from the government, we could actually hit in a bottom-out point. The bottom-out point is called the low point. And this is where we've talked about the Great Depressions in the past. The Great Depressions, the most recent Great Depression that we had was from 1929 to 1941. And in that area, we had probably around 25-26% unemployment. Many people lost homes. There was a vast run on the banks. Many businesses went under. A lot of investors lost money over time, and really our economy ground to a halt, and it caused a major issue within our nation. And eventually it's going to, as a result, the effect of this Great Depression, the last one we had in 29, is going to be a bigger, larger role of government, which I will talk about in a second here. Okay? The next phase here is as we're pulling out of a depression, we start to come back up on the rise. And you guys are experiencing that now as you look around Wausau area. We see where the Hardee's is now replaced by Checkers. You start seeing Green Heck Fans starting to hire more, maybe the paper mill hiring more. Crystal Fabrication is starting to hire more. And people are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about buying houses. And you can see a lot more sold signs on the for sale. And that's going to be indicative of the expansion phase. As the country is growing, now make sure you understand that as we're expanding here, it still runs a risk of sliding back down to depression. We're not real healthy yet. We're still kind of sick as we're coming back up this hill into the expansion phase. But we're going to start seeing lower unemployment. We're going to start seeing high gross domestic product, meaning goods and services more produced. As a result, more people are being hired, more people are making money, they're feeling more confident, they're spending money. That's creating a multiplying effect of more jobs, and as a result, our economy is starting to expand, and we're starting to push full employment, roughly around 95%. That's going to bring us into the peak phase of our employment, the highest phase, and that's the phase that we all like because everybody's making money, everybody's paying their bills, everybody's taking care of their families, and we are happy overall, unlike a depression where everybody's sad because they've lost a job. So whenever you look at the business cycle, that's the typical boom and bust cycle. The high peak areas are the boom areas where people are making money, they're buying houses, they're buying toys, those kind of things, helping their kids' education. And we also have the bust area. That's with the low point, the depression, and also the little less low point, the recession. So when we track the business cycle here, we watch it over time throughout our years. Those are the four major areas from recession. Hopefully we can get out of that quickly enough, but we may go back to the low point, or then we eventually get into expansion and then to the high point. So if you get a chance, draw them on your study guide to help you out remember those overall, and kind of look around our community, seeing where we're at overall. Now, the next thing I want to tie into is, how do you know where we are at on that business cycle? Well, there are certain economic indicators that experts, people on MSNBC, people on Fox News, people on CNBC, all these business gurus that you may know about, they look at each and every day in the newspaper, on TV, whatever it may be, on the radio. As they're listening, they look at certain economic indicators. One of the first economic indicator is the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. Basically, that tracks how much you and I are spending on goods and services. If Mrs. Thompson goes into TJ Maxx and buys a whole bunch of shoes, and everybody else likes to buy some other goods and services, that means that people are feeling pretty confident. People feeling pretty safe. They have a job, they're making some money, they want to spend it on some luxury items or whatever, and that's going to be measured by the CPI. The next one that we're looking at is GDP. That's a gross domestic product. Okay? Ever since the 70s, when we went off the gold standard, we have measured a country's strength in the economy based on how many goods and services they produce each and every given year in that country. And if they produce a lot per head or per capita, that means economically that nation is strong. The United States is producing about 42,000 per head in our country. Of course, you guys aren't producing anything because you're learning. We value education also, so you guys are working. There's somebody else that is carrying the economic load for you right now to make that per capita 42,000 of goods and services. So they're helping you, and when you graduate high school and then to tech school or college, you will be part of that workforce, making that 42,000 of value to show how strong we are as a nation. The more value you are, the more economic strength you are. So that's an important measure along with CPI. The other one is the employment rate. How we are employing our workforce, okay? How from age 16 to age 64 we are working and providing for the people who are dependent on us, the young people and the old people in our community here. If we can have low unemployment, meaning probably about 95% of our workforce working, which is pretty good, they're making money, they're spending money, they're saving for their retirement. Those kinds of things are going to help our economy go. If we start getting high unemployment, that means that we're going to start slowing spending not only on our goods and services, but also taxes, property taxes, services that are provided by the government, and so forth. So that's going to help us, or hurt us, I should say, struggle as we start to recover. So employment is very important. And you kind of maybe seen this, maybe you witnessed somebody who was unemployed during this most recent recession in 2008. Maybe they've got a new job or through retraining through one of the universities around here to get back into the employment force. Okay? So you're looking at CPI, GDP, employment, and the last major indicator that we look at is the Dow Jones. The Dow Jones is basically measuring the top 30 stocks. It's like a temperature gauge. When you put a thermometer in somebody who is sick, you want to see where their the temperature is. So we take the top 30 best producing blue chip stocks throughout time, and we look at them overall, and then we compare their growth or their loss to the overall stock market. And if they're gaining, generally the rest of the stock market is gaining. If you've been watching the news at night, they talk about this in the Business Minute. Many of the big hitter stocks, the blue chip stocks, are making a lot of money. So is the rest of the stock market, and I believe it's still over 15,000 in shares traded each and every day. So that is a good thing that we are coming into expansion, maybe into a high peak, that we're going to start clicking on all cylinders pretty soon in our economy and start to this recovery over the next few years. Hopefully in time for when you guys graduate, you'll have some opportunities to maybe get some loans from banks, and then to maybe look at the job force, and so that those areas are there. So those are the key indicators of understanding where our business cycle is and how they're all set up. Now, one of the key things that we're going to look at is the idea of government involvement. I want to shift gears here a little bit here, and I want to look at fiscal and monetary policy overall. Okay? The first thing I look at is the role of government coming in after the Great Depression, when our government stepped in and became big government to help people out, especially when the free market had gaps, and they're allowing people like the seniors and the small children to fall through those gaps because they couldn't work and to recover their losses. The government had to step in. One of the things that the government does is has two parts. One is called the Fed, the Federal Reserve Program, and then the other one is dealing with Congress and the President himself. The Federal Reserve deals with monetary policy. That's important because they're starting to deal with the money. Some of the things that the Federal Reserve can do to help get more money into a system, meaning more money in people's hands, meaning more money in people's hands so that they can purchase more things, is to basically reduce our interest rates on short-term loans. So like the loans that your parents get for your homes or for cars or for education, they reduce those loans from, let's say, 6% to 7% or 5%, excuse me. We wouldn't want to go up, but we want to lower the rates from, let's say, 6%. Let's go all the way to 4%. That means more people will take out loans for college, they'll take out loans for homes, they'll take out loans for cars, and so forth. That means they have more cash on hand to spend at businesses. Thus, businesses are selling goods and services. As a result, they're going to hire more people, then they're going to pay those people, and then that's going to start the flow of the circular flow, and also the business cycle starting to pick up. That is one way of doing it through the reserve rates. Another is to deal with the bank reserve rates here. Okay, the bank reserve rate is basically how much a bank has to keep in its vaults when it brings in a loan. So let's say Mr. Bergstrom and Mr. Grosscloss bring in $100,000 as a loan to the banks. They want to open up a savings or checking account or whatever. The bank is required to keep 10% of that loan coming into the bank for these two gentlemen. So that means that $10,000 of that $100,000 has to stay in the vault at all times, so that if we have a run on the bank, that is, we are protected so that we have money there for people to get their money out. Also, the bank can now use that other $90,000 to loan it out to other individuals in our community for buying a house, starting a business, going to school, buying a car. So the bank is making money off of Mr. Bergstrom and Mr. Grosscloss's money that they put into savings and to their checking account, whatever it may be. Okay? Is bringing more money into people's hands through loans so that they can spend and make money overall. Okay? The next thing that they can look at under monetary policy is, I got reserve rates, I've talked about interest rates. I think I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to go back through your notes and try to figure out the third one offhand. Okay? Why don't you do that and then come back and let me know what you found. Okay? Okay, I'm back. I hope that you guys figured out that the last part of the monetary policy of the Fed is to deal with Treasury bonds. Many of you have savings bonds. When you were born, confirmation, or whatever, your relatives bought you some savings bonds. A way to get more money into or even money out of the system is to either raise the rates on these bonds, which they call securities, or they lower the rates on the bonds. So if they raise the rates on, let's say, a savings bond up from 5% to 10%, I may take some extra money that I have lying around and put it into a savings bond in the name of Mrs. Thompson over, a number of years. I'm just basically giving the government a loan. Okay? That is taking actual money out of the system, and I have this bond that I have to hold on to for another 15 to 20 years before I can cash it in. So they're pulling money out. On the other hand, the Fed can basically say, well, we're going to lower rates. We want to take more money out of the system, or put more money into the system, whereby I'm going to cash these things in, and it'll have actual cash in my hand. So through reserve rates in the bank, through interest rates, and through securities, the Fed can regulate how much money is in the system overall. Okay? Another way of regulating the system that the private sector will not do is through fiscal policy. In fiscal policy, this is when Congress and the President step in. Through fiscal policy, the Congress and the President can either raise taxes or they can lower taxes. Okay? If they raise taxes, they're taking more money out of the system to be used for other things. If they lower taxes, that means that I have more money in my pocket to spend around the community, go to a movie, eat dinner, whatever, thereby helping businesses around town so that then they can hire more people, then they can pay them a minimum wage or a salary, and then they can spend money in other places. So through tax incentive or de-incentivizing people, the federal government can help put more money or less money in the system. The last part that they can do is they can either work on having more government spending or have less government spending. And that's basically a way of taking money out of the system or putting more money into the system. Depends on how much they cut back and how big government is. And this is something you're going to hear between Democrats and Republicans all the time, that government is becoming too big or government is not big enough. And that's the argument of how much money we want to feed the beast here. And this is coming back to the Great Depression. So out of the Great Depression, the role of government has expanded over this time. And it's important to understand that because of these two tools, the Fed working with Congress can help our business cycle recover a little bit faster than what the private sector can do. So that's important. Okay? Now, one thing that we have to be aware of is dealing with this nasty little beast called inflation. Okay? Inflation is basically having too much of a good thing out there. In this case, money. If we bring out too much money into a system, the more people have money, the more people have that, the value goes down. And as the value goes down, it buys less. Okay, so let's say I have $100, and one month I buy 5 bags of groceries at my local grocery store. Okay, as the government is printing more and more actual money to put in through the Fed and through taxes, basically more people have cash, and as people more have cash, they have less value in it. Now, last month I bought for $100 5 bags of groceries. Now, if I go to the grocery store now, because there's more cash in people's actual hands, I'm spending my $100 and maybe I'm getting 3 bags of groceries. That's a nasty idea of inflation. Inflation is when prices go up and the value of the dollar goes down. Okay? You have two kinds of inflations. You have demand pull inflation. Okay? Basically, when you have too much money chasing too few goods. Remember that auction we did during that system? When we had that auction for 3 rounds, we kept adding money from your savings, kept adding money from the government giving you money back in taxes, then also dealing with a low interest loan, putting actual money there, and how the Mountain Dew got more and more costly for the same product. That's the idea of demand pull inflation, when there's too much money chasing too few goods. The other one is called cost push inflation. That's from the producer's side point. If a producer is, let's say, a building construction guy, and he builds houses around Wausau area here. Let's say his cost now for hammers and for saws and for wood and for nails or whatever goes up. If that goes up, he's going to have to charge more for his finished product, which is the houses. So if the cost of inputs like nails and hammers and saws and labor goes up, this producer has to charge more on the output or the finished product, and eventually that's going to cost or create cost push inflation. Okay? Well, that's covered a lot of problems and solutions in the American economy. I would go back and take a look at the terms again. I would also want to look at the examples on that sheet dealing with fiscal policy of taxes to solve the recession, also the fiscal policy of government spending, and then monetary policy. Why don't you go through those problems, those economic problems on the next page, determine how fiscal and monetary policies should be used to correct each problem. When you're done, start playing again, and I'll go into basically Unit 5. Okay? Welcome back, guys. I'm glad you're getting through Unit 4. I hope that you didn't have too many questions here, dealing with monetary fiscal policy, dealing with discount rate, which is our interest rate to solve the recession. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teachers. They'll be able to help you out because there'll be some questions on that on the final. Excuse me. Now let's move on to international trade, Unit 5. Okay, international trade was our last unit that we talked about. Okay, the key word here in this is globalization. Okay, we live in a world where we have better technology, we have faster shipping, we have faster planes, and we have major corporations that are now starting to trade not only within our country, the United States, and within our region, the Midwest, but also globally. We live in a global marketplace. Okay, where we are trading with countries all over the world for things that cost too much for us to make here. And we basically trade with them because it is cost effective. We can get those things cheaper than us making those objects themselves. That's called comparative advantage. We can make oranges or coffee beans or chocolate in Wisconsin. We really could. But it's going to cost a lot of money. That's why we go to tropical areas and we say, you guys grow these because it's cheaper for having you guys grow these products than for us. And we will trade you an equivalent product that would cost you a lot of money in your country to make for something else. So let's say Wisconsin would trade, let's say, cheese curds or milk or ginseng maybe for oranges. Okay, we go down to either Florida or maybe let's go into some tropical country like Belize and to bring in oranges or bananas or coffee or whatever that's cheaper than made down there. So comparable advantage in a global marketplace is very important. Okay. Also, what countries look at in the past is to protect a lot of things with domestic businesses. Okay, businesses that are on our home soil. And they created trade barriers in the past that really weren't productive for the global marketplace. These barriers were basically to protect their domestic businesses and to turn their back on the globe. The problem is that if we want to have cheap, good products in our world, we are going to have to use comparable advantage, and we're going to have to trade with other countries in this world so that we can get the products that we need and that we value and that we want at cheap prices. Okay? One of the things that countries did in the past, they created some barriers like quotas. Quota is basically allowing a certain amount of a product into a country, and that's it. Let's say Hyundai of South Korea wants to bring in 40,000 units of the Kia. The U.S. government says, no, we're not going to take 40,000 new cars. We were only going to take 20,000 new cars because we want to protect Detroit. We want to protect Ford and Chevy and all these domestic businesses from Kia coming in and basically cornering the market because of the vehicles that they're making. So that would be a quota, blocking out another nation's products. And that's not going to be beneficial in a global marketplace. Another one is a tariff. A tariff is a charge on an import coming from another country. Let's say Mr. Bergstrom makes hats. Okay? He makes a hat for $10. And that's part of his input, his labor, his material, whatever it is. But the Norwegians can make that same hat for $2 cheaper, $8. Okay? So Mr. Bergstrom is going to have a hard time selling hats to customers because they're going to buy the Norwegian hats more than his because his are $2 more. So what he does is he calls the U.S. government or he calls our state government and says, hey, we need to look at some tariffs here. So what the U.S. government decides to do is say, hey, all Norwegian hats now are going to have $4 put onto each hat coming into our nation as a tariff, as a tax. So now the Norwegians, even though they make their hats for $8, with that tax, now they're making them for $10, nobody's going to buy them for $12. 8 plus 4 is 12. They're going to turn to Mr. Bergstrom, who can still make those hats for $10, and that's called a tariff to protect it. Okay. Another barrier that we look at when we bring in products is an embargo. Sometimes nations maybe politically don't agree with us or militarily don't agree with us. And what we decide to do as a world is basically we're going to stop trading with you. We're going to shut down your ports. We're not going to let any products into your country as an import or buy any product out of your country as an export at all. We're basically shutting you down. So we're trying to hit them in their economic pocketbook. And that is very successful short term to help nations comply because people want to eat, they need food, they need services, and if they're not trading, they're not getting those things into their country, and as a result, the people are starving, they're not very happy, and eventually political will push the government to do something. Okay? But overall, embargoes, quotas, tariffs aren't real good for globalization to be able to open the markets, to be able to get cheap, good products. Okay? So these are just basic terms that you're going to need, not only about opening trade, but also with putting trade barriers there. Okay? Now, another thing I want to look at, the idea is an organization called the World Trade Organization. An organization called the World Trade Organization was created in 1995 in Geneva, Switzerland. It was created by the big countries in the world, the U.S., Europe, Japan, Russia. All these countries got together and they said, we need to create a more free zone for trading for products to keep it cost down so that we can make more profit. Because remember, we live in a global marketplace now. We have to trade with one another. But there's a division of labor also there where different countries provide different products based on the high or low service value that they are. So what the World Trade Organization does is it oversees these trade agreements between countries like the United States and Belize or even Wisconsin and China. Whatever country trade organization we make agreements with, the World Trade Organization, or the WTO, oversees it to make sure that the trade is fair, that products are being exchanged on an organized basis, that if there is a disagreement, that there is a court that each of the countries who are suing each other can go to and to have resolution. resolve the problem that's going on between these two nations and whatever good or service that they're trading. Okay, so the WTO is the only unified organization in the world. We don't have a unified education organization. We don't have a unified health organization, but we do have one for trade to make sure that the trading within our world is as flawless and smooth as possible. Okay, one of the things they're looking at, the WTO is really looking at as a tool, is to create a free trade. Get rid of the barriers, get rid of the quotas, get rid of the tariffs, get rid of the embargoes, cut costs, pay a cheaper labor, get cheaper resources to make a finished product that they can make money on. And that's what free trade is, to be able to get rid of those borders and almost create borderless states, where states like the United States and Mexico and Canada can create an organization called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, whereby they can trade their goods and services within North America without quotas, without tariffs, and without embargoes, thus keeping their costs low, making as many products as Americans and Canadians and Mexicans need, and it's cheap for the consumers to buy. That is a way to reduce your costs and maximize your profits. Okay? The one thing that we do worry about here is the sovereignty of a nation. If we start getting rid of the borders, the local control, especially over your resources, gets taken over by the World Trade Organization, where the World Trade Organization can tell you, hey, I know you're a fisherman out in Miami, but your fishing nets are not only catching tuna, but they're catching also dolphins or endangered sea turtles. You have to stop doing that. If you're a fisherman down in Miami and the WTO is telling you to do that, but that's your livelihood, that's going to cause some problems within our own power, within our own country, or our sovereignty. And there's going to be some things that have to be worked out so that people's livelihoods of fishermen and also people's power within our own sovereign government, our absolute power within our borders, gets resolved. So there's some things that are getting worked out here through sovereignty within nations so that nations aren't losing that protection overall. Okay? Oh, there's one last term, and I should have mentioned this before, but it's at the end and I forgot. It was protectionism. Protectionism is basically when countries start to get worried about that they're losing their resources like oil and minerals and aluminum and labor or whatever. They want to block out the rest of the world, and that's when you start seeing the quotas and tariffs and embargoes. Protectionism is the overall umbrella where those things happen. So we kind of keep the world out, but typically protectionism is going to be broken down, and we're becoming more and more a world market. So what I would suggest is look at international trade and see what's going on. We looked at our clothing tags, we looked at our shoe tags, we looked at the things in our classrooms, and we live in a small Wausau metroplex, but we are impacted by the global area. And there's a nature of trade, and why we trade is important. So make sure you go back and look at why we trade overall, and how that trade impacts the products that are coming into our stores and the nice, neat little packages that we see, but it's a very complex process to get here. I would also go back and look at some of the trade barriers. As we're going through this globalization and global marketplace, some nations are kind of pulling back away from that because they worry about losing their sovereignty. They worry about losing their power, and as a result, losing their resources makes them scared a little bit. So they try to look at protectionism with trade barriers like quotas and tariffs to protect their overall. And over above this is the referee, the WTO, and as it's functioning to try to wade through these disagreements and wade through these times when countries are scared and they're nervous about what's going on in their nation. The WTO is there to help settle trade disagreements and to help facilitate or make it smoother within the trade. Okay, this is the end of Unit 5. I hope that you guys learned something with this, or it's still fresh in your mind. If not, go back and take a look and listen to this podcast again. Look at your notes. And if you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher so that you can prepare for some of those questions also on the final exam. But I just want to wish you good luck. And I enjoyed you, and I'm sure Mr. Grossclass and Mr. Bergstrom can also say this, but we enjoyed you in class this year, and we wish you good luck at the high school next year. Really study hard tonight, and get ready for your test on Tuesday, February, I'm glad it's not February, June 4th. So take care. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.